Good night, itchy eyes. Good night, sudden sneeze. Good night to your symptoms of allergies. Xyzal is the allergy medicine you take before bed. It provides powerful relief while you rest your head. Not just all night, but all the next day. Xyzal keeps working, keeping allergies at bay. And without those annoying symptoms disturbing your rest, you can wake up the next morning feeling your absolute best. Remember, be wise all, take Xyzal. At night.
So good, so good, so good.
Great gifts for mom? We've got them. And they're up to 60% off at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
You know they have Marc Jacobs?
Gotta show mom some love.
That is so good.
Snag amazing deals on Mother's Day gifts from Barefoot Dreams, Kate Spade New York, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
On the afternoon of February 10th, 2025, Sunyu Elementary School in Daejeon, South Korea buzzed with the usual energy of a Monday. The school day had ended and most students either went home or went to an after-school program called a hagwon. For 7-year-old Kim Han-ul, a bright and responsible first grader in classroom 2, her day was far from over. With only 1 month left until she would officially be a second grader, Han-ul was following her routine as she had done countless times before. At 3:20 p.m., after her regular classes ended, her teacher sent her upstairs to a third grade classroom on the second floor, which is where the arts and crafts program was held. This program was from 3:20 to 4:30. Han-ul, like many of the other students in her class, navigated a lot of her daily schedule independently. She knew to pack up her things and head to the after-school program, and when the class was over, she also knew to pack up and head downstairs to the front entrance, where a hagwon shuttle bus would be waiting for her to go to her next activity. But this is only on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. The after-school program ended at 4:20, and she typically was on the bus ready to go by 4:30. The short walk from the classroom to the bus was a familiar one. She'd been going to this academy for a whole year. No one would suspect in this routine walk, this would be the last time Han-ul would ever be seen alive. Welcome to Korean True Crime with me, your host, Mimi Mizuko. Thank you to my patrons for making this show possible. You can support Korean True Crime on Patreon today. Join us on Discord for movie nights of films based off of real crimes. Link is in the description. And lastly, and most importantly, I have an exciting announcement to make. Korean True Crime now has merch. This first merch launch is a singular design, which you can see if you have video podcasting, or check out the link in the description. There's multiple different quality and price options, and it ships internationally. Today, I am wearing the Bella Canvas Super Soft in vintage black. I'll put up some pictures of my husband wearing the Heavyweight Comfort t-shirt and the Cotton Heritage sweatshirt. If you're interested in buying this merch, find the link in the description. Warning, today's episode contains some graphic descriptions. Listener discretion is advised. The class had ended at 4:30 p.m. and Han-ul had packed up and left. But at 4:40 p.m., Han-ul has still not arrived to the shuttle bus. The drivers are usually accompanied by workers at the hagwon who are aware if anyone is planning to be absent, but they hadn't heard anything from Han-ul's family. The bus driver grew concerned, so he contacted the school and asked them if she had been dismissed yet from class. They assured him that she had already left. After a few minutes had passed, he contacted the school again, telling them no, she didn't come out. The after-school teachers were surprised by this and started to search around the school. Maybe she went to the bathroom, but they couldn't find her. They thought maybe she had run away. So they immediately contacted Han-ul's parents, just a few minutes after speaking to the bus driver. Hana's father answered the call from the teacher and immediately heard the sense of urgency in her voice that she likely was trying to cover up with politeness. You want to both maintain that customer service voice, but also relay that the call is serious. The teacher told him, Hana did not come out to the bus and they couldn't find her. They asked the father if he could call her kid's phone. Many students, especially young students in South Korea, have kids' phones. There are a bunch of different kinds. I'd mostly seen the Zem phone a lot, which is like a miniature Samsung Galaxy that's a lot more restricted. Hana's kids' phone had an application installed called Find My Kids. The app was installed by her parents, who used it to monitor her location to make sure she got to school safely and just to have peace of mind knowing where she was. They could also monitor her phone usage and see what she was doing on her phone. The largest selling point for the premium subscription in this app is a feature that allows parents to activate the microphone in the phone without the child knowing. This allows them to listen through the phone to hear what's happening. This is sold as a feature to locate your child if they go missing, or see if someone strange is talking to your child, or maybe your child's being bullied. This feature is very appealing to parents, but also to teachers, definitely the center of debates about privacy invasion. There have been too many incidences of parents sending children to school with listening devices for whatever reason. But for Hanul's parents, it was a tool for them to ensure their daughter's safety, especially because she had transitions like this one where she left the after-school program and walked herself to the bus. Hanul's father, after getting off the phone with the school, booted up the Find My Kids app and checked Hanul's location. The app showed that the phone was still at the school. He relayed this information back to the school and tried calling Hanul's phone. It rang, but no one answered. So he continued to try to call as him, his wife, and Hanul's grandmother drove to the school. After multiple times of calling with no answer, he decided to boot up that microphone listening feature, just hoping he would hear his daughter's voice. Instead, at first, he heard nothing. He turned the volume all the way up, but all they could hear was heavy breathing. It clearly was not Hanul. It sounded like an adult running a marathon. Then they could hear running footsteps and the frantic opening and closing of drawers. The last sound he heard was the unmistakable sound of a backpack zipper. Hanul's family was panicking because clearly Hanul didn't have her phone. Was she even near her phone? Had she left it behind? Had someone stolen it? Hanul's father knew what he had to do. He went back into the Find My Kids app and activated a safety feature that allows parents to sound off a loud alarm from the kid's phone. This overrides any silent or vibrate settings on the phone. The piercing sound that came through the phone was meant to draw attention to it, in hopes someone would find her. Through the listening feature, he could hear the alarm going off, as well as heavy breathing. Then he heard a voice, an adult, female voice, cursing under her breath. Whoever had Hanul's phone was panicking, trying to shut off the alarm. The academy staff were joined by Hanul's parents and grandmother at 4:50 p.m., just 10 minutes after the school had called them. It has now been 20 minutes that Hanul has been missing. With such a quick response to her being missing, the chances of finding her increased substantially. When the family arrived, they asked if anyone had heard her phone ringing or the alarm that they sounded off, but no one had. The school is large in an urban area. Even the alarm might not be heard if it was just put in a desk a few classrooms away. Together, they all started searching the school, shouting Hanul's name. The Find My Kids app, however, was starting to add confusion to the search because the location tracker was glitching. As they looked at it, it would switch around from the school to a next-door apartment complex. As they searched the school and around the building, the father contacted the police at 5:15 p.m. The police arrived quickly at 5:23 p.m. and split their search between the apartment complex and the school. By this time, however, whoever had Hanul's phone had shut it off, completely severing the connection that gave the parents clues about where she was. This is when panic was sinking in. Hanul's grandmother started going into classrooms, searching closets, and as she finished the first grade area, she went upstairs to the after-school program. Next door was a technology room, also known as the audio-visual room. From the hallway, she noticed that the door was slightly ajar. Technology rooms are typically locked because expensive technology like computers, iPads, projectors, etc. can be stolen. The room inside was dark. Grandma Kim couldn't find the light switch on the wall, so she turned on the flashlight on her smartphone. As soon as she turned on the flashlight, she saw a woman standing in front of the storage closet, closing it quickly behind her. She asked the woman, "Have you seen Haner?" The woman, who was out of breath, muttered out she hadn't seen any students. Grandma Kim saw a backpack on the ground behind her, and then looked up to see blood smeared on the woman's cheek. The woman had positioned herself against the storage door so that it was fully closed. Grandma Kim knew that this woman meant danger, and she knew she could not handle an altercation. So she nodded politely and said, "Okay, I'll keep looking elsewhere." She walked out of the room, and as she did, she heard the door lock behind her. Grandma Kim ran as fast as she could to the police. She told them what she saw and begged them, "Go fast." The officers, joined by Hanul's parents, sprinted to the audiovisual room. They forced open the audiovisual door and then the storage closet, but the woman wasn't there. As the storage door flung open, Hanul's father saw what no parent should ever see: his daughter, Hanul, lying motionless in the corner, covered in blood. The police called an ambulance and sent the other officers to apprehend the woman the grandmother saw. Hanul was rushed to the nearest trauma center and taken into surgery, but the damage was too severe. At 6:35 p.m., Hanul was pronounced dead. The time after finding her was chaos. The police quickly located the woman sitting at her desk attempting to take her own life. She had cut her throat and wrists when they found her. The teacher was Myung Tae-won, a 48-year-old second-grade teacher at Sanyu Elementary School. She was assigned to classroom 3. They learned from the school's administration that Tae-won had only recently returned from a medical leave due to mental illness. She actually had a history of depression that had caused difficulties leading to her going on what was supposed to be a 6-month medical leave, but she had returned early after her doctor said she was getting better. We'll get into Myung Tae-won's history later. In the meantime, the police knew what had happened to Hanul, so a full autopsy wasn't necessary, and they told the parents it wasn't necessary. They didn't need to go through all of that. But the parents wanted to know exactly what had happened to their daughter because they wanted the world to know as well. The autopsy was conducted and gave more insight into what had happened inside that storage closet. She had been stabbed multiple times in the neck and shoulder area as well as on her arms and legs. The ones on her arms and legs tell us that she was fighting back against the teacher. Hanul's parents raised a valid point when criticizing how is it possible no one heard her scream. Well, the National Forensic Service conducted their autopsy on Hanul, and there were signs of strangulation as well, which tells us she must have been trying to silence Hanul while stabbing her. She might not have been able to scream. While Hanul's family was working with the prosecution for the upcoming trial and planning the days of their daughter's funeral, the prosecution was trying to figure out who is Myung Tae-won and why did this happen. Myung Tae-won is a 48-year-old woman who taught a second-grade class in classroom 3 at Sanyu Elementary School in Daejeon. Despite having been a teacher for many years, she had not taught students for months. Tae-won had a long history of difficulties with her mental illness, namely depression. In 2018, she had received a formal diagnosis of depression, although she had been struggling with this for years. For a time, it seemed like she was able to finally manage her symptoms. But depression, as South Korean psychiatrist Park Jong-woo would say, is a self-harming condition, which very rarely manifests in violence towards others. In Tae-won's case, however, she had other underlying mental illnesses that were not being addressed. Her depression existed along with suicidal thoughts and aggressive impulses that were becoming something she experienced daily by the time of the murder. Psychologists on the case emphasize that depression alone cannot explain her actions. There's no direct link between her diagnosed condition and the crime she committed. Instead, her violent actions point towards extreme emotional dysregulation. On December 9th, 2024, Taewon had requested a 6-month leave of absence from work, citing her deteriorating mental health. She confided in her doctor about the suicidal ideation and feelings of anger, which means she was self-aware at one point. She was aware that this was happening and had tried to get help. This leave was intended to provide her with time to stabilize. But just 20 days later, her doctor decided she was fit to return to work and ended her leave of absence. The decision came despite Taewon reporting she was still experiencing the anger and suicidal thoughts. The police have criticized the thoroughness of this evaluation if she literally was in the midst of a mental health crisis. South Korea's education system has for decades also been criticized for its handling of mental and physical health issues. In Korea, all school districts have formed committees dedicated exclusively to assessing teachers' mental and physical health conditions. Despite this, they're largely a waste of resources. Not because these committees should not exist, but because they're not doing anything to help educators. They have less enforcing power than an HOA. So even if they do try to make a decision, they often get a lot of backlash from the community or those involved in the evaluation. In Daejeon, where the Sanyu Elementary School is, this committee has not reviewed a single case in the past 2 years. And there have been many cases. They just haven't done anything about them. So teachers with physical or mental health emergencies are left to their own devices. They're not being supported by their district. Seoul, a much more densely populated area, hasn't reviewed a single case since 2021. It's not statistically likely that there have been 0 educators with problems in that much time. Considering Korea has been going through high rates of teacher suicides in the past 2 years, this is going to have to change, or things are going to get a lot worse. This is no excuse for what Myung Jae-won did, because everyone is responsible for their own mental illness, despite it not being their fault. But we also must address the nightmarish conditions that teachers in Korea have been working under that has led to the steep increase in teacher suicide. According to Representative Jin Sung-mi of the Democratic Party of Korea, 9,468 teachers and other elementary school staffers have received treatment for depression in 2023 alone. This is more than double since 2018. Although this is only 3.8% of teachers in Korea, this is only the number of teachers who sought treatment. There's likely many more. Depression did not make Taewon violent, first off. According to Dr. Park Jang-woo, a professor of psychiatry at Kyunghee University's College of Medicine, depression is a self-harming condition and rarely results in physical harm to others. He warned that blaming her medical history on her actions risks reinforcing societal stigma, which can cause further prejudice against depressed patients who need treatment the most. The system is really ill-equipped to address Taewon's needs, which led to her returning to work on Thursday, February 6, 2025. But her reintegration wasn't what she had hoped. They didn't have a class for her to teach because they had already reassigned her class. So she was essentially just assisting the administration. On February 7th, the next day, she was already experiencing pretty intense emotional instability. A colleague had noticed Taewon was squatting in an unusual position, behaving oddly, and muttering to herself under her breath. The colleague reached out to help, but Taewon quickly became violent. She lunged at the other teacher, grabbing her head in a headlock and twisting their arm. Reports have varied on the extent of the injury because the injured coworker chose not to report the incident to the police. Some claimed the colleague's arm was broken, others sprained, some just that it was a minor injury. Other coworkers at the school had intervened and separated the two, but no one decided to contact the police. The incident instead was reported just to the school's superintendent, who issued a formal warning to Taewon, and he suggested she restart her medical leave. I don't understand why the coworker would choose not to report the incident, unless maybe there was a lot of pressure from the school district to not bring attention to the issue. Maybe it would be bad press. I don't know. Involving the police at this point could have saved Hanul's life. And I do believe that there was responsibility for them to report this. Violent behavior, whether adult or child, at a school needs to be handled seriously each and every time. But instead, the superintendent filed a report with the Department of Education for her to be put on leave again. And in the meantime, they just asked Chaewon to apologize. We've talked about this a little bit before, but humility is greatly valued in Korea, sometimes more than legal justice. I can understand this sentiment because police are not the only solution to problems. But in this instance, I do think it was warranted to contact the police. The school's response, or lack thereof, really reflects a trend of reluctance to involve police or mental health professionals in altercations. The injured coworker and the school deciding not to start a legal report on the matter, which would have likely led to her receiving a mental health check, was a missed opportunity for them to intervene. Of course, they couldn't have known what Chaewon was capable of, what she was going to do, but the signs were there that it wasn't something good. She was already being violent. In the meantime, Chaewon was removed from being in the classroom, even as support, and she was assigned to work under the vice principal while they processed the superintendent's report. She could be fired for this, but it was going to take a lot of time for the school board to review it. This demotion was just adding to the humiliation she was feeling. She knew she was out of control already. She had even confided in her husband that she was feeling a lot of resentment towards her coworkers and her boss. She felt like everyone was preventing her from doing her job because of her history with mental illness. The demotion had worsened her feelings of alienation and frustration. The mental health struggles, the humiliation from the altercation with her colleague, being demoted, just everything together was creating a volatile mix of emotions in her. On Sunday, February 9th, Chaewon came in to work hoping things were going to be better. As unhappy as she was in her situation, I think she ultimately did want to return to teaching. But that day, things weren't going great. The school's provided computers were outdated, as a lot of technology is in Korean workspaces. The office at the school I worked at had computers running on Windows 95 and 97. And we had computers dying, causing power outages, Wi-Fi going out hourly. It was a disaster. And from what I would learn, most of my friends' places of work also had whatever was cheapest. I heard complaints from people who work in Japan as well. Places that everyone describes as living in 2050, yet our printers needed repairs weekly. My phone had more processing power than my work desktop. And that day, because Chaewon was already running at a 9 out of 10 anger, her computer running slowly and crashing was the final straw. She became so overwhelmed, she smashed the computer, throwing everything off of her desk, started cursing out her frustrations. The vice principal, who she was sharing an office with, was shocked by this behavior. He reported the incident to the superintendent, but like before, there's no immediate consequence. The school's failure to provide her with a psychiatrist or therapist when she clearly was in a mental health crisis, and them allowing her to continue working, was a huge oversight. I may sound like I'm placing a lot of blame on the school, because likely she should have been fired by this point. I am, in a way, placing blame on them. They shouldn't have even allowed her to be on school property when she clearly was a danger to other people. She'd already proven she would hurt others. So the next day, February 10th, the day of the incident, Chaewon was a ticking time bomb. She arrived at Sanyu Elementary School that morning with an anger and despair on her mind. At 11:50 a.m., she called her husband and sounded frantic. She told him that she felt like she was the only one who was screwed up. Her husband was aware of her recent outbursts and her difficulties with her mental health. He had been telling her just take time off, regardless of the medical leave being approved. Chaewon wouldn't listen to this reasoning. She had already made up her mind. During her lunch break, she had visited a nearby store and purchased a knife. At this point, they believe her intention was to take her own life at work, which there had been a case in South Korea of a teacher taking their own life in their classroom just after school hours. But that wasn't the only one. Suicide is the leading cause of death for people between 10 and 39 in Korea. South Korea has the highest suicide rate among any developed country, with more than 20 people per 100,000 taking their own lives. No one knew what Taewon was planning to do. She was pretending everything was normal at work. Back at the school, she spent most of the day on her phone. She was obsessively searching for information on how to murder. She was looking up terms like carotid artery, medical student murder, Incheon Elementary School murders. You might remember these two cases because we've covered them. The medical student murder was the Genius Turned Killer episode, and Incheon Elementary murder was the Incheon Child Killers episode. It's very obvious what she took inspiration from when you go back and look at these cases. I'm not going to go into too much detail, so go back, take a listen to those if you haven't. But she clearly was copying what others had done. These cases are truly despicable, and knowing that that was her frame of mind as she planned her day shows just how much malice she had in her heart. But Hana wasn't the origin of her anger. She'd never taught Hana. She'd likely only ever seen her in passing. Hana was just the only student she had access to alone that day. Psychologists would later describe Taewon's behavior as a form of anger transfer. This is also known as displacement. It's a defense mechanism where she redirected her frustrations towards a vulnerable target. Her anger was from work and her continued struggles with her mental health. But she can't confront these sources of pain directly because she's not in that position of power. Instead, like many bullies, abusers, and killers, she fixated on a vulnerable victim, someone unconnected to her personal grievances. Hana became that target. Taewon's decision to kill wasn't a sudden impulse, but a premeditated attack. Yes, a very shortly premeditated attack. She hadn't purchased the knife until that day. But the police would learn that she had been searching for how to kill someone for days prior to the attack. Prosecutors stated that she had an extreme anxiety about abandonment by her husband, family, coworkers. This, combined with her inability to regulate emotions, led to her spiraling that day. Throughout the morning, Taewon's behavior grew increasingly erratic. At 3:14 p.m., she called her husband. The school day had just ended, and this is when Hana was likely packing up her bag and moving to the after-school program, while the other students went home or went to hagwons. When she called her husband, she was talking in circles. She was ranting about her unhappiness and making these vague, cryptic statements like she needed to catch one person to ensure she wasn't the only one unhappy. She told him that she'd already had 3 chances that day and swore she would succeed on her last chance. Her husband knew she was having an emotional outburst, but he really didn't know what she was planning to do. He tried to beg her to leave work, begged her to go home. He wasn't sure what she was going to do, but he knew she would regret it. Taewon didn't care, though. She hung up and started to walk through the school. Taewon knew the school well. She knew that the audiovisual room was always locked and unused after school. She went to the AV room and made sure that the door was unlocked. That was not her first trip to the AV room that day. She had been there multiple times to make sure it stayed unlocked. She was mentally going through what she was going to do. As the after-school program started to clean up at 4:15, Taewon stood outside the door, watching the students as they packed up. The after-school program was next door to the AV room, and she knew what would come next. So she called her husband and started asking some rhetorical questions. What happens if I go to jail? What would happen to our house? Would they make me pay for the damages with my own money? She never said why she would be arrested, and he likely meant she was talking about the assault on her coworker. As she spoke, her eyes settled on Hana, the quiet first-grade girl who was the last one to clean up. The students were sent out to get picked up by parents or go to the shuttle buses closer to 4:30 p.m. As the students started leaving, Hana was the last to exit. She approached Hana in the hallway. Taewon approached her in the hallway and offered her a book. She said, "If you come really quickly, I'll give you more free books before you go home." And what reason did Hana have not to trust a teacher? She didn't have any. So she followed Taewon to the audiovisual room sometime between 4:30 and 4:40 p.m. Taewon closed and locked the door behind them. Within the next 10 to 20 minutes, Taewon had strangled and stabbed Hanul, targeting her neck like she had read about in other cases. Hanul had fought back. Her defensive wounds tell us that. As Hanul's phone began to ring at 4:50 p.m., Taewon was likely cleaning blood off of herself and hiding the knife. The ringing persisted for a long while until the alarm was sounded off by Hanul's father, but no one else in the building heard it. When Grandma Kim entered the audiovisual room a little after 5:30 p.m. an hour later, Taewon still had blood on her face. After Grandma Kim left to alert the police, Taewon turned the knife on herself, attempting to cut her throat and wrists. Her suicide attempt, however, was interrupted by the police. Both Hanul and Taewon were rushed to the hospital together. But while Hanul died from her injuries, Taewon survived. The days following were full of grief, outrage, and a desperate search for motive. The National Forensic Service conducted the autopsy at the parents' request, confirming that she had been stabbed to death. The brutality of the crime ignited a national conversation about the safety of students, mental health awareness for teachers, and the failures that allowed this to happen. On February 11th, the Daejeon West Police obtained formal arrest warrants to search Taewon's house and her electronic devices. Taewon was still unconscious at this time in the hospital, so they weren't able to question her yet. But she was under constant police guard. Although she was still technically allowed visitors, no one came to visit her, not even her husband. On February 12th, Daejeon West Police's Chief Yuk Jun-myung visited Hanul's funeral, where he also met with the grieving family. The visit came just after the father had publicly criticized the police for the handling of the investigation, because at a briefing the previous day, the family learned about Taewon's motivations through the live news, not from the police. They were frustrated that they were learning about new things in their daughter's case from the news, rather than the investigators. Shouldn't they be the first to know any information? Chief Hyuk apologized to the family and stated that the meeting was merely to counter inflammatory media reports regarding teachers and their daughter. They really wanted to stop rumors and wild stories before they began. Hanul's funeral lasted for 4 days, and then she was cremated and laid to rest on the 4th day at Daejeon Memorial Park. During the funeral period, Hanul's father shared memories of his daughter, including her love for K-pop idol group IVE. IVE might not be huge internationally, but to Korean girls in elementary school all over the nation, they were iconic. I didn't have a single elementary student who didn't have a stack of like 20 or 30 IVE photo cards. I'd have students who practiced their dances daily. And Hanul adorably wanted to become an idol singer like Chan Won-young from the group. Hanul's death was known nationwide and even internationally at this point, so funeral wreaths were sent to the funeral from people all over. This included from Starship Entertainment, the company that manages IVE. Her father expressed hope that Hwan-young might attend the funeral to help her spirit, but he understood that it was very unlikely. His request, however, went viral on social media and fans started urging Hwan-young to attend, while others stated that it wouldn't be appropriate. Many people attacked the father, calling his request selfish. Regardless of what you think, Starship Entertainment issued a response stating that her appearance would be unsafe, not because someone might hurt Hwan-young, but because impressionable fans might harm themselves or take their own lives, hoping that a pop star would attend their funeral or visit them in the hospital. This might sound far-fetched, but fans can become so obsessive once they've created parasocial relationships in their heads. The company also asked the public not to criticize the grieving family due to the request, which I think is really important for them to acknowledge how quickly people jump to bullying and harassment online. In Daejeon, community members started leaving chrysanthemums, dolls, and sweets outside of Sanyu Elementary School. Multiple parents at the school had expressed fear of returning to school. The murder completely shattered people's trust in the safety of schools. And Sanyu Elementary School closed for a week before it reopened on February 18th. But some parents still were choosing not to send their students back to school. Parents and community members were expressing their outrage to the Daejeon Office of Education, They were protesting outside of the superintendent's office for a week. On March 4th, Superintendent Seol Dong-ho issued an apology and announced plans to install over 2,000 CCTV cameras across all public schools in the district. This seemed to appease many of the protesters, but they also wanted acknowledgement of the mistakes that allowed this to happen at all. On March 7th, Taewon was able to finally be questioned, and this is when the police learned most of what we know now about her motive and what she did throughout the morning. She was due to be in court the next day, but she failed to appear, which prompted the police to arrest her and hold her in jail. On March 12th, with permission from both Taewon and Hanul's parents, her personal information was released to the public, which is quite rare in criminal cases, except when a case is as heinous as this one. When criminals' information is released, it's posted for 30 days, but really it lives on forever with the internet. On March 27th, the prosecutors in charge of the case indicted Taewon for Hanul's murder. They set her trial for April 28th, 2025. If you're listening to this the day it releases, you may be wondering, aren't you releasing this on April 29th? Yes. However, I don't record the day episodes come out, so I will keep you updated about the trial once it's concluded on all of my socials. It's likely just the first of many trials to come, since they will likely seek the death penalty. A professor at Ewha Women's University, Chung Ik-jung, stated that this happened due to a lack of clear and detailed regulations to enforce relevant safety measures that led to a gap in protection of students. There's also been a huge surge in the use of monitoring apps like Find My Kids in Korea since this case. People are scared, and honestly, we should all pay a little more attention to which adults have access to kids. In most of the cases I've covered, we usually have a pseudonym for the victims. Usually I pick a name that's most popular during their birth year. But Hanul's family chose to publicly release her name. For them, it wasn't just about honoring her memory, but holding the school and murderer accountable. They shouldn't forget her name. The family believes that the school bears as much responsibility as Myung Taewon. They were negligent and ignored multiple signs of aggressive behavior by Taewon. This has started discussions on how a failure could have happened in a school like this. Shouldn't student safety be their top priority? The public's anger reached the education minister Lee Joo-ho, who has proposed a new piece of legislation called the Hanul Act. This was announced on April 23rd. And this proposed law aims to mandate mental health monitoring for teachers, requiring those deemed unfit due to mental illnesses to take mandatory leave. The law also calls for urgent intervention to address unusual or aggressive behavior. If the teacher is reinstated, the government would then require the teacher to undergo regular assessments to confirm their ability to perform the job safely. I'm really wary of this proposed act because, as we know, her depression was not what made her violent, and I wonder how this could be used by schools to further the stigma towards people with mental illness. The consensus among experts is clear. While Taewon's mental health struggles were real, they didn't excuse her actions. The murder exposed a critical need for legal safeguards and proactive intervention to protect students from educators who are unstable. If we blame depression alone, we risk stigmatizing those seeking treatment and obscuring the broader failures that really enabled Taewon to commit this crime. Some districts have decided to create their own policies to ease parents' fear and increase child safety measures. Some locations are giving portable emergency devices to students that allow them to press a button and alert parents and authorities of an emergency. This device also tracks their location, which alerts parents when the child leaves the school. As the trial approaches, or passes, depending when you're listening, I hope that this never happens again. Though Hanul is gone, her name will live forever, and hopefully inspire and bring change to make even just a small part of the world safer for kids. Her father left a message for Hanul. Hanul아, 예쁜 별로가 Hanul, go to the pretty stars. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Join us on Discord for free movie nights. Find sources on Patreon, quarterly sticker club on Patreon as well. Follow the show wherever you listen and check out the new merch. Link is in the description. Thank you to my patrons, Vix Mac, Lala, William White, G1 Edwards, Ferry, Elijah Hancock, Anomanom, Dr. Bob, Lumos, Emma Brown, David DeFoya, Adriana, Pip, Dade512, Lisa, Olive, Caitlin, Nicey, Breaker O'Day, Kitten Who, Asta Bach, Quilt00, Kristen, That Lady Rach, Amber, Rebecca, and Quick Bick. 다음에 또 봐요. See you next time.